Welcome to Uncaged. Today we're speaking with Jackie Corbelli. I know Jackie best from her role as the founder, chairman, and CEO of BrightLine. BrightLine is a major player, major technology player in the connected TV space. Really, I'd say one of the foundational companies in the space. And as we've seen the world of Netflix and Hulu and all these things take over everything we do with a visual or video platform, Brightline is right in the thick of things. But Jackie has done so much more than that. Every time I speak to her, she seems to be working on something new. She's the founder of the U.S. Coalition on Sustainability. They've done so many things. One of the things is the platform they've built called SustainChain, which I'm sure we're going to talk about today. It's a really important platform that allows folks to really tap into supply chains in a much more sustainable way. And so we'll talk about how that's working. Jackie has a broad background in a number of other things. But, I think today we're going to probably touch on all of those things in some form or fashion. But really, I'd say we're going to learn a little bit more about how Jackie thinks and how Jackie approaches problems. Anybody who's worked with you, Jackie, knows you have a very methodical way of doing these things, and that's why you've been able to build this stuff. So I'm excited to get into this. But before we start, Jackie, tell us a little bit about you and your career.
Well, first of all, thank you, Bant. I've been a huge fan of yours and love what you're doing through this vehicle, and appreciate you having me.
Absolutely.
It's funny. People ask me to tell them a little bit about myself, and I generally, sort of say, nothing that different from anybody else. I grew up in a small town. I went away to school and came to the big city and started to get involved in the financial sector, largely because I had a lot of loans to pay off after I graduated from school. But the experience really became as a lot as for everybody, right? It just starts us down that path, and where it went from there after 15 or so years in that sector was toward starting my own company, BrightLine, that you mentioned. And 21 years ago, started that company back when connected TV wasn't called connected TV, and TV was considered dead. If you remember when online and digital media started to really reawaken us, and we just persisted. I persisted. That's, I guess, one of the things that will be a thread. Persisted in the notion that technology was not going to cause the extinction of television, but it was going to redefine it and redefine our audience relationship with it. And so BrightLine is enjoying a really fun time right now because of the growth of connected TV, yes, but certainly the transformation of the medium that's going on. And because we've been there for so long, we're benefiting from the fact that we have as much experience as we have, and the technology footprint is actually pretty comprehensive across all of the apps out there. So that I start with BrightLine because it has consumed really most of my time over the years. But I've also been extremely lucky to be able to get involved in other things that I'm very passionate about. A lot of it rooted in world affairs, where I got my degree actually at Columbia as well. And most recently, you mentioned the U.S. Coalition on Sustainability, and SustainChain is, I think that there is probably a much better way for us to approach and tackle global supply chains in this this sort of critical time, to figure out how we can get to sustainability and address climate change and things like that. And that's where the U.S. Coalition on Sustainability came into play, as well as the technology that I created called SustainChain.
Yeah, I mean, it's been amazing. I know, Jackie, you have an incredible network that you've built over the years. And certainly, your thinking always underpins with some form of a technology, utilizing technology in a clever way, efficient way, a way to scale solutions. And I think everyone listening needs to understand I've gone to the Corbelli School of Leadership, so I know all about how she does things. But I mean, tell me a little bit about how you think through some of these challenges. I know one of the things that, you and I say off the cuff sometimes is that all problems are solvable if the will is there, right? If the will is there, right?
If the
So
will
tell
is
me,
there, yeah, sorry. And also if you just believe that it's there, do you know what I mean? You believe that it can happen. I think
Mhm.
that's a big part of all of this is, and, just to answer your question, I put everything through this same lens of if it were to happen, if we were to get somewhere specific, what's the ideal, reality that we live in, whether it's how television is going to be, sort of not just something we watch and get talked at with, how can it be something that becomes an encounter that we get immersed in and so on. So that's the BrightLine thing. Or geez, there's got to be a better way or farther we can get, right, with some of these attempts, right, to help the world get cooler and things like that. And it really does come from the same place, which is like, okay, I'm gonna dare to take out a clean sheet of paper and draw it. What does it look like when we get there? And compare that back to where we are and start to look at the things, tease apart, like what are the big sticking points and sources of value, therefore. It's that kind of approach of getting out in front, right? And putting yourself in a place where you can look back at the path that got you there.
Yeah.
And to your point, Ben, it just comes down to that's a method, it's a framework, right?
Yeah.
And again, just having the audacity to think that that type of thinking, if you can implement on it, is perceived as valuable by others. And you
Mm-hmm.
can either make money from that if you're in business, or you can get the support and advocacy of people who think you have something when it comes to solving big problems.
So, Jackie, I mean, we have been through such an interesting path with television. I loved the way you described it. I remember when Brightline first came to market, everyone was talking about interactive TV and how that was going to be so exciting. And there was a moment, right? There was a moment where interactive TV was happening, but it got reinvented and in this whole connected TV world. Where are we right now? I mean, it seems like it's getting bigger, but I mean, where are we in terms of the maturation of connected TV?
That's a wonderful question. Let me see if I can be succinct as you want me to be. Long and short is we're in a complete sea change. The medium itself, right, is coming into television, is coming into its own finally in the context of digital technology and the Internet of Things.
Hmm.
And, we might agree, I think we agree that started happening a long time ago.
Yeah.
Um, but there was something that happened that has been a very sad for all of us in some ways, the pandemic, certainly very challenging,
Hmm.
tough time. But it was also a time where that became a sort of catalytic in terms of the way the internet and television came together. And up to that point, there was a convergence.
Hmm.
And since that point, it's been a collision. And that's the way I look at it. And once it collides, that's when you start to see the actual business models, profit models, and so on starting to shake violently.
Hmm.
Versus what had happened before, which is, the television medium was, and I would argue still is, the most important medium of communication. Quality, the quality of content and the quality of the experience.
Hmm.
I continue to believe the television is the most important one, but it had been done, look, it's an incredibly lucrative
Hmm.
industry. when it's done, specifically when it's done in the way it's been done since the 1950s, in many ways, making adjustments for cable and so on. But it was forced, it was a reckoning. This is not a nice to have option, and people are going to stick with what they already know, and you're going to continue to generate 70 to $100 billion a year off advertising. It was, oh, wait a minute, they're streaming. And most of the content that people were watching during that time was streamed. And so what that did was it just put everything into overdrive. So if you sort of fast forward, what has it been? Almost 4 years now. Amazing, right? What you're seeing is the product of the challenge of doing that, like stepping into the here and now, and not this, tendency to keep drawing off, the value, the wealth creation of traditional TV advertising. And it's causing that this sea change is really changing the entire industry. We don't think of TV leadership as broadcast networks necessarily anymore, or certainly not cable, cable TV, right? We think of it as Netflix. We think about it as Amazon Prime, and certainly Disney and Peacock, NBC have really done a pretty good job of getting in very quickly and aggressively. But there's a lot that's going on now that speaks to your question specifically regarding maturity. The rise of retail media, the ability for equipment makers, device makers, the TV makers, Samsung, LG, Vizio, and so on, to actually get in on the ad game, because they have the ability to stream content too. And so the emergence of FAST channels, free ad-supported television, that's now come into play. And when you put it all together and you sort of bring that to, look at it through the lens of Wall Street, who often decides the direction, or heavily influences the direction of a market as it matures. Like the requirements in that regard are, tell me how you're going to make that thing profitable. Tell me how you're going to have, generate sustainable growth. Tell me why I should believe that you're going to be a winner at this. And that is where we are in the current marketplace. And just over the last 6 weeks, the things that have been, announced and are developing are just, are, I believe, big flags that we are at a point now where very quickly the plates are going to make big moves, and we will then start to achieve a different, level of maturity in the whole thing.
Wow, that's really exciting. And it's funny, as an old media guy, I think of the season that we're moving into, the upfront season, as being kind of like the agenda setting season for all media, really. And it's fascinating how that is, I'd say, completely different now than it was even 5 years ago, definitely 10 years ago. And how connected TV and how we think about media in general with programmatic, et cetera, has kind of rewritten how one can look at that whole upfront season. I mean, for folks that don't know about the upfronts, this is really when all the advertisers look at the media opportunities that they can tap into with all the content providers and all the distributors and publishers, mostly kind of TV publishers. And certainly in the connected TV world, that has all been rewritten and all have been changed. So it's very, very exciting. But Jackie, I mean, certainly you've been doing a lot of stuff outside of BrightLine. And one of the big ones that I know that you and I have discussed is the work that you've done with the U.S. Coalition on Sustainability. Take people through a little bit of the journey that you've been on with that. I think that work started somewhere in like 2019-ish. And tell me a little bit about what you've been doing.
Interestingly, while all that was occurring in the pandemic for connected TV and streaming, there were other things also happening, which we know based on 9/11, right? Big crises that we go through kind of raises the level of humanity in a way, right? And one of the things that I've been involved in, I think, Bent, as you know, economic development, and was, really privileged to be leading an integrated economic development program in Africa,
Right.
alongside Jeff Sachs. And so I have a passion. I was able to sort of apply passion in terms of problem solving and actually get some on the ground sort of sense as to like what makes solving problems in the world so different from solving problems in business, which I think is something pretty critical distinctions there that need to be understood. But when we got into the pandemic, what I realized was that people were listening differently to anyone who was coming into the space of sustainability and climate change. They were saying, right, like maybe we should all be thinking about each other a little bit more, and we should be at the very least thinking about the things that got us here to this pandemic, and and started to think, well, maybe I should try and help some way. And how can I be a little more practical in the ways that I contribute to, or play a part, right, in where we go with all this. And that was the same setting in which the U.S. Coalition on Sustainability and SustainChain was formed. It came to be because of the generosity and passion that some folks, including Bill Gross and specifically his daughter Jennifer Gross, had and have in driving sustainability and getting in the world right, where social and economic justice are concerned. But the U.S. Coalition on Sustainability came into existence after the clean sheet of paper exercise of saying, what does it look like when we get there? Like, when we look back, what do we see? And when it comes down to it, sustainability is going to happen when we've changed, as you know, and you've had some amazing conversations and done some really deep thinking on this that you've shared, and I'd love to listen to. It's going to come down to how are we going to fundamentally change food systems, water systems, energy systems, health systems, education systems, and how are we going to do that at a global scale, right? On a global scale. And by the way, how are we going to do it really fast? Because it seems like we're running out of time. And as I reflected on it, it seemed pretty straightforward, weirdly, and it comes down to, well, all of it comes down to, and the pandemic put a really fine point on it. It comes down to resiliency and sustainability of global supply chains within industries, across industries, right?
Yeah.
All of it ties back to those big systems, and all of it ties back to whether we get to some level of success on climate change. And that's where SustainChain came into play. So
can you break down SustainChain a little bit for me, so to help our listeners understand exactly how they could utilize it?
Yeah, sure. So there's some big problems in the area of rebuilding supply chains, but even more broadly in terms of businesses' capacity to really be productive or constructive in this whole sustainability environment. It has to do, there's a tremendous fragmentation out there. There's incredible duplication and redundancy, and things are being done in these sort of vertical silos. They don't, there's very opaque. And therefore, there's a lot of wasted resource. There's a lot of, doing things the same way over and over and expecting a different result. And we really need to sort of move that sort of out of the way in order to make the change we need to achieve. So what SustainChain does is it sort of says, what I said when I started to build it was, I don't want to duplicate any other tool, any other solution, anything that's
Hmm.
already happening in this space. So where's the white space? And what was easy to identify was that transparency, the
Hmm.
ability to approach changes to your own supply chains with intelligence. How do we
Hmm.
use AI to bring insight on where the solutions lie, where the funding lies, where the true innovation or private-public partnerships are? And so
Hmm.
SustainChain was built to create this community that all agrees that unless we get end to end with this, unless we surround it in a more holistic way, and unless we really commit to concerted and connected action, none of it matters. And
Right.
so that's what the technology does. It's set up to bring in businesses and organizations of all sizes and types,
Yeah.
to bring them in on a common footing in terms of what area of the sustainability equation and supply chain equation they're focusing on, trying to accomplish, major change in, and bringing funders and innovators and public-private partnerships and so on together on
Yeah.
a single platform.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to me, just my experiences with working with you is really one of your tremendous strengths. If I look at kind of the connected TV landscape, it was in some ways similar in terms of having so many different stakeholders. Everyone had a piece of the puzzle, the technology companies, the media companies, the agencies, and the advertisers, and so on and so forth. And it was always trying to figure out how to weave those individuals in a way that would work for everybody. It's like the value squared type of model. How do you find that moment? And certainly I think that one of the beauties of the work that you're doing in the sustainability space is really trying to find that commonality too. Like, how do we get everybody to sing off the same hymn sheet, right? And move forward together because we have to. But I mean, Jackie, let me change gears a little bit here. I mean, you've done some amazing work across a variety of different industries. And I always try to kind of get a sense of, what drives people, or sometimes how I say it is like, what gets you up in the morning? What's the fire here to keep this stuff going and that passion for what you do?
I mean, I think we've had this conversation
Yeah.
before. I think the easiest way to say it is I just like to fix things. I'm a fixer. It's, I love and find it satisfying to try and understand exactly why something is something.
Well, I
And
would
I
say
get
that you're like
excited
a,
when I see, huh?
yeah, I would say that you're like a fixer on steroids because, like some of us are focused on very small problems in this world, and you're the type of person that's just like, give me the biggest, hairiest, audacious, ugly problem that can be done, and let's figure out a way to tackle it. So, I
I
mean,
don't
it's
know
been,
where it comes from. Except that maybe it comes from, my immigrant families, we're going to make this happen, when they
yeah,
came over to Italy. I don't know. Maybe it came also from, having to deal with some pretty challenging and complicated things as a kid. Certainly what I know is that when I figure something out or think I have, I I go from hypothesis to action really quick just to test it. It's very exciting for me to do that. I get so
yeah,
excited. It's like a kid in a candy store. I really don't know where the energy comes from. So, because
yeah.
people have asked me that often over the years.
Yeah. How do you keep it going?
I
Well,
don't know.
listen, here we are, 2024. As I mentioned, we're going into the upfront, and certainly that is kind of like the TV advertiser big moment. But 2024 is an interesting year. Lots of stuff happening, lots of uncertainty. What does this year look like for you for all the things that you're working on?
This year is a particularly exciting year for me on several levels, in that, as maybe is coming across, BrightLine's journey,
Mm-hmm.
right? It is coming to this moment now
Mm-hmm.
where it is the solution right? It is the standard for what we've set out to do, which is how do we honor the viewer in a television setting by giving them some ability to shape it to the way they want to experience it. And because of connected TV, we can do that. Because of the technology, we can do that. Because of the ubiquity is a big word to use, but thorough comprehensiveness of the technology footprint in the industry, we're sitting in an incredibly exciting place. In terms of the SustainChain piece, and AI in particular, you know, we launched an AI engine that really governs what's happening inside SustainChain and the sort of the speed with which it can do so, where it's a reinforcement learning engine, and as folks who are familiar with reinforcement learning know, it's all about identifying pathways that maybe didn't even exist before.
Right.
And that sort of real-time ability to surface that and deliver that where that opportunity can be capitalized on. So where AI is concerned inside the technology we built for the US Coalition, and where technology and market have come in terms of what the value that BrightLine can bring, it's a transformative year in so many ways. And that's what is exciting me most about it, that, you know, the energy I wake up in the morning like smiling.
Yeah.
And that's not always been the case. And you know that. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, that company has been excruciating. So let's just be clear.
No. I mean, look, I think you mentioned a couple things. I think the combination of the resiliency and seeing through trends. I mean, clearly the change of TV has been something that has been clear to some of us for the last 30 years, right? You know, we saw it in the 90s starting to break apart, but it held. I mean, traditional TV held strong and firm. As you hit it, you know, there's a lot of money involved and a lot of very, very powerful people. And now it's really being restructured, and the new structure is going to be very, very exciting. BrightLine's right at the heart of this. And certainly I love to see that you not only are dealing with the complexities of the media world, but you're taking on the complexities of the sustainable business world as well, and helping us all figure that stuff out, because that's really kind of the center for humanity and all of us. Yeah.
Don't give me too much credit, because the latter helped also keep me sane with getting BrightLine through that pandemic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, Jackie, it's been amazing talking with you. If there are folks who want to reach out and learn more about what you and your teams are working on, where's the best place to reach you?
Well, to learn more about SustainChain, it would be www.sustainchain.org. Excuse me, .world. .world. And then it's brightline.tv on the BrightLine side of things.
Awesome. Well, it's been amazing having you on the Uncaged show today. We've been speaking with Jackie Corbelli. She is the founder, chairman, and CEO of BrightLine. We've been talking a lot about their role at the center of the connected TV space and how that continues to evolve, and I'd say accelerate now in a scaled way as the new technologies are able to really fix a new foundation for the industry. Really, really exciting stuff. And then all the work that she's doing in terms of sustainability. She is the founder of the US Coalition on Sustainability. And one of the things that they've rolled out is SustainChain. So please take a look at that as well. And Jackie, it's great to have you on the show, and we look forward to having you back.
Thanks so much, Matt.